Hi all, this is Nizar, co-founder of Sitecore User Group Chennai. Today we have a SUG session on Sitecore PowerCell extension. It's a privilege to have Michael West doing the honest with the session today. He is an MVP, technical architect, and a wonderful gentleman promoting Sitecore across different user groups. Over to you, Michael. Thanks a lot for joining. Please do the honest.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll start over. I do appreciate the warm welcome, the opportunity to present to the members of this user group and to anyone that's watching in the future the pre-recorded webinar. One thing I'd like to mention is if you happen to have some questions and you want to share it with the host, feel free to do so during the presentation. You're also welcome to post in the channel within the Sitecore Slack chat for module SPE, and I'll try to monitor those as best I can in case you've got something you'd like to be addressed before the end of the presentation. But once again, this presentation is about Sitecore PowerShell extensions. My name is Michael West, and you can contact me with that Twitter handle, MichaelWest101. Who am I? I'm a Sitecore Technology MVP. I've been one for a few years now, and I appreciate the honor that Sitecore has awarded me with that recognition of Technology MVP. I'm also a contributor to the Sitecore PowerShell Extensions module. I've been working on it for a number of years with the founder of the module, Adam Naimonovich. And normally I put the resources at the end of the presentation, but I felt that it was best to move it to the beginning in case you had to drop off early. The documentation for the module, there is a website dedicated to everything about the module, and you can reach that at doc.sitecorepowershell.com. And I mentioned earlier about the Slack chat. You can go to Sitecore chat and register for the Slack community. It's an open community, but it's invitation only, just to avoid bots and just unwanted people just joining for the heck of it. So you can go to the forum on the Sitecore chat website, and usually the administrators will accept the submissions within the same day that you've applied. The Sitecore Stack Exchange is another great resource. This is a community site just for Sitecore, and you can ask questions, post answers, and get points. If you're familiar with Stack Overflow, it's like that, but just for the Sitecore product. And if you are on Stack Exchange, there's a PowerShell extensions tag. You can use that tag to filter out questions and answers specifically for this module. You can also see the source code. Handle. There's a Twitter handle specifically for the Sitecore PowerShell extensions team, scripting SPE. So if you like to interact with the team as a whole, then that would be a good one to follow as well. So what's new with SPE 5.0 and 5.1? There are some improved reports. Reporting is, one of the most common functionality and features that people installing the module are looking for. They'd like to interrogate the content. What's the size of media that I have in the media library? Or what's some of the audit log that's being recorded in the log files, and how can I surface that into a report rather than having to download a bunch of log files and write something else outside of the module for it. So we've improved or added reports in the 5.0 and 5.1 release. 5.0 came out last year, just before Symposium, and 5.1 came out here just in the last few months. The reports now support custom objects, so if you'd like to query or create custom data but not actually represent items in the content tree, you can build those objects and pipe them into the appropriate command for the report. We've added some new commands. The list is too long to put into a slide, but some of the notable commands include managing the archive or the recycle bin. Imagine that you have some content and you want to archive that. Typically, a content editor would go to the content editor ribbon and then they would choose to archive, perhaps on a particular date. Well, now you can perform those actions through scripts. So you could build your own tools to do the same thing. Renderings and placeholders. So if you wanted to add placeholder settings, or you want to add remove renderings, add remove layouts. So there's a laundry list of presentation commands that are available, and they are listed in the book, in the documentation site, under a presentation section, so you can see the complete list of what's available. And the SPE remoting is refactored. If you're not familiar with SPE remoting, it's a way to write scripts outside of Sitecore and have them reach into Sitecore to manage content, publish, do all sorts of creative things that you've come up with. So this this capability was initially built on a SOAP web service. We've deprecated the SOAP service that's used for SP remoting, and it's now all through an HTTP handler. So we've basically opened up to any amount of data you want to consume or to send to your Sitecore instance. It's now possible. We've tested several gigabytes of data back and forth from maybe to and from the media library. So if you've got a process where you need to upload a bunch of images or download a bunch of images, SP remoting would be right up what you need. Just some quick screenshots for the reports. If you navigate to the PowerShell report screen, there's in the desktop, there's a menu that will take you to PowerShell reports, and you can see that there's an audit trail report that reads from the log files. There's also a media items by size and type. We found that it was helpful to look for images that were consuming lots of data in the database. Assuming that you are using media items that are stored in the database and not in file, this is probably a report that you'll run at least once during a deployment of a new website. There's also a report you can see here, find all Sitecore PowerShell commands, and I ran that to help list out the archive commands from my previous comments. So you can see here there's a get archive item, remove archive item, and so forth. Those would be useful in the case of I've deleted an item and I chose to send it to the recycle bin instead of permanently delete. And now we are 30, 60, 90 days after I've deleted that item, I'd like to go clean out the recycle bin. These commands would be useful for that. Another really notable feature is within every script in script library, you're able to define rules. These rules range from whether or not it should show up in the ribbon or the context menu, or if the script should run at all. And so we've added support to almost all of the uses of the scripts and script libraries, so that when you're trying to run the script, let's say for a scheduled task, the rule on the script is evaluated before the script is run. So that's going to conserve memory in terms of creating PowerShell run spaces. You won't have to run a rule within the script because you want to know whether or not the script should run. So it's sort of self-defeating to do that. So we've shifted the work onto the rule, which is a more efficient way of determining whether it should run. We've added some new out-of-the-box tools. One would include the elevated unlock. Imagine that you have a team member leave and you want to unlock that item. Now, maybe an administrator could do that, but you could grant access to particular roles, and then this button in the ribbon or in the content editor warning would appear, and the content editor could actually unlock the item. So this would be useful for like a power user. Maybe a team lead, they need to unlock an item for a team member that left. We also have some additional features for managing data, like import bulk data through a spreadsheet or generate a lot of like random data, new items, new content, so forth. There's a feature for snippets. I'll show a demo for this in a little bit, but this is related to the integrated scripting environment. Made some improvements to the console. There's some improved coloring to help you understand the difference between, the command name, the parameters, and their arguments. We've also built a data sync module. This is built outside of the Sitecore PowerShell extensions module. It's really an extension. It's an add-on for it, but it's you could think of it like a starter kit for integrations. If you're familiar with the data exchange framework, that is a starter kit for building all sorts of integrations. That has a much steeper learning curve than the data sync module that we've prepared. You can find it on the GitHub repo. And there's also, on the repo, there's a reference to an article written by a member of the community that describes how to make use of it. So potential scenario is, I've got a spreadsheet, it gets dropped into a folder maybe once a day or several times a day, and I just need to read that in and create new items or update items based on the spreadsheet. The data exchange framework you might find to be much more complex to try to solve a simple task. So the data sync framework or the data sync module is to address those kind of scenarios. I've also prepared a content migrator script. If you're familiar with Razzle, which is a product for migrating content from one Sitecore instance to another, or you've worked with Sitecore Sidekick, which is an open source module that helps, one of the features is a content migrator that helps you move content from one environment to another. I built a proof of concept with the content migrator script, and that is included in the repository. It makes use of SPE, SPE remoting, and the Unicorn sync product. And as you can see in the screenshot, it's a simple example at loading up this prepared script that I mentioned is included in the module. I connect to two Sitecore instances, and then I can copy over a single item or multiple items, perhaps an entire tree. I can overwrite the entire tree or just update the content that has changed. All right, what's coming in 6.0? We've renamed everything. So anything that contained the former name, this would include DLLs, configuration files, all of that has been renamed. And I'll show briefly in the demo what I'm referring to that has changed. We've also included some training examples. I found that one of the best opportunities to help someone learn Sitecore PowerShell extensions is to include examples in the module. We've had some in the past, and every once in a while make some updates to it, but I'm including a much more formal set of examples that cover each integration. This would correlate with what's in the documentation site. So, hey, how do I create a new context menu, or how do I create a ribbon button? There's a working example for each of those integrations. And like I said, you can refer to the book and that would walk you through it, but there's nothing better than having a functional example included in the module. And if you've got any other ideas of what you'd like to see included in the module, feel free to open a GitHub issue or message me on Slack. I'm always interested to hear what new and creative ideas or what challenges that your team has to solve. So the demo is going to include a crash course on SPE. As previously mentioned by the host, I'd like to address for beginner viewers, what is SPE, what does it look like, what's available, how do I navigate through all the features that are available, and then show some of the file changes that are included. The file changes really impact upgrades. If you've never installed the modules, let's say it's a brand new instance of Sitecore, it would be a non-event for you. You just install it and move on. But if you're upgrading from a previous version, you'll see that some files are changing. And then I'll walk you through some of the snippet features and some examples of what snippets are available, and then go through some training examples. All right, so let's dive right in. So once you've installed the module, you're going to see a couple tiles in the Launchpad. Included would be the PowerShell ISC icon, as well as PowerShell reports. I have some previous presentations that talk about the PowerShell reports. If you've got some ideas about what you'd like to see or some improvements, feel free to send them my way. If we go to the desktop, you'll see from the start menu that there are two icons here, the PowerShell console, PowerShell toolbox. You'll also see under development tools, the PowerShell ISC, which is a scripting tool. And then you'll see the reporting. One thing to keep in mind is that these icons will only appear for certain roles. So if you're an administrator or developer, you can expect to see these. The reporting tools, I believe there's one step you have to grant access to a role in order for content editors to see the reports. So that's also documented in the book. So let's have a quick look at the console. You can see from here that this very much resembles the console that is on your workstation. And this is right in the browser. So anything that you want to run, this would include standard PowerShell commands like get item, or if you want to manage renderings, then all of this could be run from within this console. So let's take, for example, I want to know all the DLLs installed in IAS that have the name SPE. Then we can see that these are the new DLLs that are included with the module. So formerly the name was different, and so now we've renamed it to SPE. It helps to identify that this is the module. The name says it, right? And if you're curious, it's Sitecore PowerShell Extensions, not PSE, which could be called PowerShell Extensions. So SPE. So we have an abstractions DLL. This helps with support for newer versions of Sitecore. So currently the module in 5.0, 1, and 6.0 will support Sitecore 8.2, 8.1, and 8.0, as well as 9.0, 9.1, and so forth. So we've created this abstractions library to help make it work between those versions. We also have the core DLL, which has most of the commands that you would require for running scripts, as well as other integrations within Sitecore, such as the ribbon, the context menu, and so forth. We have a packaging library to help with post deployment actions, post step. So if you create a package, you could have a script run to delete items and so forth. We also have a DLL that's embedded within the core library. That's not something that you would need to be concerned with in 6.0 because it's embedded and will automatically determine which version of Sitecore you're using, and this abstractions library will assist in making that decision. If you worked with a previous version of Sitecore PowerShell Extensions, you'll see this version-specific DLL there, and that required a different package depending on which version of Sitecore you've installed. So now we can have a unified package that will work for multiple versions. You can also see that there is a configuration path. We've moved all of the configs that come with SPE into a folder. That helps with organization. If you're working with Sitecore 9, Sitecore moves all of their configs into a separate location, and so now SPE will just be a little more organized. Hopefully that helps, and hopefully those that have had to deal with managing and patching the configurations, they'll appreciate the shifts we're making. All right, from the toolbox, you'll see that there's a number of pre-built tools that you can make use of. I mentioned earlier there's a data management feature included. One example is a data importer. So I've got a spreadsheet, I've got item name, and then maybe the fields that I'm changing, title, description, whatever you could think of. You edit that CSV, you upload it using the data importer, and then it updates the content within a few seconds, depending on how large the file is. So rather than trying to create a custom script for you to do that, it made sense to just include that out of the box, because how many projects do you work on where you're trying to move content from one environment to another, and it gets kind of tedious and you want to create packages? Perhaps a CSV is a more convenient way, because it doesn't have much detail in terms of what type of template. It just has item IDs, and so that could simplify your process. And pretty soon we'll include a button here for tutorials. So if you want to launch a list of tutorials and walk through each one of those, then this will have a little checklist for you to follow through. Reporting, as I mentioned previously, you can run any one of the reports from this menu. If you write your own reports, they will appear in one of these lists, or you can create your own report tree. So, for example, I created a training report section, and I can use security, specifically rules on this item, to control who has access to that. So perhaps you put certain users in a role indicating that they're beginner users, and then when they come to the report, they'll see those report sections appear. If they're taken out of the beginner section, then they no longer see the training reports. So that's an example of what you might do for your team. And we have the PowerShell ISE. So this is probably where 95% of the community will go to author scripts. From the screen, I can type in commands. So for example, we saw in the console something that looks a little bit like this. And then I run that script. And in the pane below, you'll see the results of that command running. So while this is useful, you probably would want to save it. So from the screen, you can save the script into an existing library. So let's say, for example, your team is writing ad hoc reports, and we only need them for special cases. We don't necessarily need it in that reporting section, but we want the report available. Then this would be an example where I could save it into one of the media library, one of the script library items, and then come back later on to make use of it. So let's take, for example, I want to open an existing report or an existing script. I can navigate into the tree. So let's say I go to reporting, and let's say the audit trail. And now you can see that that particular item in the tree is represented by this title here. And if I make changes and hit save, then it will write back to that item. So very easily, I can make a change, run it. If I like it, hit save, and then come back later, and all of my changes have persisted. It would be recommended that if you're writing scripts and you want to include those in deployments, that you would include them in a part of a tree that's not the Sitecore PowerShell extensions module, but create your own. So you probably saw in this an example. Let me quickly show you. So under the script library, I have SPE. It may benefit your team if you created a new item. Let's say you followed the new module wizard, and you created one for your team or your product, your website, whatever you want to call it, similar to how this demo one. And then under there, you can nest different modules. So this is a folder to represent your company or your product. Then you can create different modules. These are going to represent different functionality that you might have. So let's say I've got one dedicated for reports. I've got one dedicated for content migrations and so forth. And then you can use the modules within here to provide that functionality. Because these are Sitecore PowerShell extension modules, don't confuse it with the module name, the nomenclature that's provided by Sitecore, but we've created these kind of sub-features that can be deployed independently, and you can enable them or disable them. When you disable them, it will disable it across the board. So any feature that was included within this module will just go away. It'll disappear from the reports, disappear from the context menu, or from the ribbon. So you can easily turn off a complete set of features using this checkbox. And that's also documented in the book. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, there was some training, and so we'll cover that in a little bit, but you'll see that it's included within the module. So you install Sitecore PowerShell extensions, and then straight away you'll see this tree here for training. We go back to the ISE, and I cleared out whatever script was currently loaded. There is a plugins capability. So from within the plugins, you could add your own buttons in here, and there's a way to essentially create an item in the tree that is a script, and when you're in the ISE, you can click the button and have some magic happen. In this particular case, I created a snippet button, which presents me with this dialog. This dialog is created by SPE. So from a feature standpoint, hey, I need to create a dialog that's going to capture user input. You can do that with SPE. And in this snippet, there is a snippet for such feature. As we can see, there's some pre-built script that's output into this pane. You can use the snippet for a script that you've already started writing. It's going to inject it right wherever the cursor is. So if you're working on a large script and you need to throw one of these snippets in there, just create some space, put the cursor where you want it, and go away. Just go right ahead and add whatever you need. So now we can see that this script is here, and when I execute, I'm prompted with a dialog that provides me two options. I can hit OK, and results will contain the output from that command. This is really just to indicate that the user has hit OK or they've hit cancel. Excuse me, I get a drink. So if they hit OK, then you know to continue. If they hit cancel, then you can exit out of the script, or you can perform some additional operations like ask another question. The data that you're collecting from this dialog, in this example, you can see that I've created a new parameter called selected options. Selected options will contain whichever choice I've selected. If I have a checkbox or some other UI element, each one of those will be populated with the selection. So if we go here and do selected option, and I'm going to choose option B, then you can see that the value 2 was selected. If I go to my options that I provided, we've got, excuse me, it's the first one. Option A is 1 and option B is 2. So now my value is 2. So I could have a switch statement. I could do whatever I want to perform additional logic. Now, something that might be really interesting and new to some of you is the find item command. So let's start with a simple example. So what we have here is a command that makes use of the content search API. So in traditional development, you're going to query items, and you can use get item, get child item, and that will work, and it can be efficient, but it may not always be what you need, and it may not be as efficient as you need it.
Right?
So in the case of I need to find all items that are based on some template name and have a value in the title, for example, that contains the word Sitecore. Now, if I run this, I think nothing comes back. Well, it's because in my demo, I've changed the template. So if I change the template name and run it, then we can see a bunch of items that represent content items, but the results are actually from the search index. So I can do get member, and this will demonstrate that each item that I'm getting back is a search result item. So, well, when would I use this? is the question. Well, you could write a report, and that report could perform a content search query, and this would be highly efficient compared to, crawling every single item, a fast query or just a regular query. Like those won't necessarily meet all of the criteria you have to filter content. And you could create a much more complex script, but if you're using this criteria option, you could, the template name is this, and the title contains this. So in a very concise script, I can get items that match my criteria. You may find that this is useful for prototyping something that you might later write in C#. So let's say, for example, the business is requesting a change in the logic to give me certain types of results based on some additional conditions, or maybe you're modifying the conditions. Well, you could create an equivalent version of the content search query in PowerShell, prototype what's going to happen, and when you're pleased with that, go back, make code changes, and deploy that to production. But if it's the case of I've got a report, then you just write it in PowerShell and move on. Now, in this example, the criteria can only perform AND operations. So it's this and this and this and this, and that's all you get. If you choose a different snippet, more specifically the predicate, now you can perform much more complex queries. So in this case, I can say, I want this template or this template or this template or this template. And when I have that matched, I want to AND that operation with the title containing Sitecore. And when I've got OR operation and another AND operation, then I can AND that with, it's got to be a part of this particular path within the Sitecore content tree. So as complicated as I've probably made that sound, you can see that I get some results. And if I was trying to do that with criteria option, it would be impossible because I can't do any OR operations. But now with the predicate, you can do that. So this would be similar to using the predicate builder, which under the covers, we're actually doing that. So you create a new predicate builder, perform some additional operations, build it into some complex expression tree, and then ta-da. All right. Now, in one of my previous comments regarding the read variable, this particular command is what most users will go towards when they're trying to capture input from the content editor or whoever's running that particular script. So in the training, we've included some additional examples. And so if I go into the tree and look for, I forgot where it's at, dialogues. I just added this, so forgive me if I forget where it's at. So I created this kitchen sink example. And now we can see all of the UI elements, different tabs. You can manage rules and security and all sorts of things. So where would this, let's say, for example, where would the rules play in? Well, I want the user to manage the rules, but I don't want them to directly have access to the item that contains the rules. So you could give them this UI, they manage the rule through this UI, and then you go update the item in the field that contains the rule. So you might have a particular item where every field on there may not be something you want them to have access to change for whatever reason. Maybe it's a part of a tree where you don't grant access to content editors. You can use the Sitecore PowerShell extensions UI, the read variable command, to present to users something that you want them to see, collect that data, perform some additional operations, update some data, do whatever it is that's important to you, and you've effectively delegated the administrative role to this UI for that user. So it simplifies the security you're granting. And there's a million use cases that you come up with on why you've decided to use this dialog. Um, some of the neat features of this is, like, I want to hide controls based on a checkbox value, or maybe I want to do it based on a drop-down value. So rather than confusing the user with many options, have them pick one and then show them only what they need to see. And then based on what this option is, you know whether to do this or that. Now, this dialog is actually built with Shear, which is really on its way out the door. But there is no really solid replacement for this at the moment. So I could see that this is going to be around for a couple more years. And while the content editor exists, these dialogues should exist for you. So don't hesitate to start building something with this, because the time you save building it is well worth it. You're not having to write .NET code to build this UI. You write a couple simple scripts and you're done. All right. And just to make sure I covered everything. Yeah. So find item, really important. Use that as much as you can. Avoid fast queries and queries as much as you can. The training, like I said, is going to be included, and that is something really I felt was important for the community members. And if you go through this list, you'll see, for example, the the context menu. I created this training menu, which would appear here. So any of the most of the script menus that would appear are going to exist under this node right here. So if you want to create some utilities for your developers, maybe utilities for certain power users, this integration point would be something ideal for you. But you can see that you can do insert item, ribbon, content editor warnings. So let's say we've got gutter. Now, if you just install the module, it would be beneficial for you to go to this toolbox and choose the rebuild script integration points. So if there's any gutter, ribbon, there's like 3 or 4 integration points that require data to be created within the core database. So this command is a shortcut to do that for you. You can also do the same thing from within the ISE. You can rebuild the contextual menu, the gutter, the ribbon, and the control panel. So if you want to create tools, but not necessarily people know that they're PowerShell, you could add it to the control panel, or you could add it to the ribbon. A user won't know where it's coming from, but they'll benefit from whatever feature it is that you've built. Are there any questions so far based on the material brought up?
No, I think it's good so far.
All right, wonderful. All right, so we've hopefully I covered some of the points for the beginners of the module, beginner users. But I wanted to be clear about a couple points about using the module. The first one is, it's not just about like changing content. It's not just about running reports. This module is really built for everyone that is working within Sitecore. There's a tool for many situations, but the module is designed in a way that you can build your own tools. And as I mentioned before, where we've included the toolbox of pre-built features, you should approach it like, is there something already there? And if it's not, then how can I use an existing example to achieve the result that I require for my product or for my project? If your first thought is to go to write some .NET code, open up Visual Studio, then you're probably unaware of some feature that exists in the module. Um, any UI element that needs to be created in the content editor most likely can be done with SPE. Any report that you need to write, whether it be Sitecore content or content external to Sitecore that can be acquired through a web service or a file, you can use SPE to achieve that. And so I encourage you to, read the docs, go to the Slack community channel, ask questions, go to Stack Exchange, see what questions are there, and get a really good idea of what's available. PowerShell in and of itself is not really a complicated thing to learn, and I've demonstrated that through the documentation site. There's a training section that is here to enable beginners of PowerShell to work with the module, but maybe you don't you don't want to use PowerShell just for the module, but maybe you need to learn it to install Sitecore. So, for example, the Sitecore installation framework, it's all PowerShell. So this is a skill that is necessary for both SPE and for SIF, and this documentation is to help kind of nudge you towards that. So it's got some of the best practices like how to work with collections, the difference between the collection types in both their syntax and performance. So for example, if I were to create a new list of names in C#, I could do a mostly equivalent version of that within PowerShell. And then later on, I've got a performance consideration section to show you that, well, yeah, you could do that, but this is better. And this is just as good, and so forth. I break down how commands are structured. So, for example, a PowerShell command follows the verb noun syntax. So we'll have the verb and the noun. And this applies all over the place. So if it's an out-of-the-box PowerShell command, if it's a command that's included with SPE, if it's a command included with SIF or Exchange or whatever you can imagine, the naming convention is the same. So if you can pick up those skills, then you can apply it in many areas. Working with Azure, you're going to need to know this as well. So if you're not sure where to get started with PowerShell, this is probably a decent place to check out. And then there's tons of books in the community that you can read about. I cover some of the most common commands that any PowerShell user would come across. So, for example, how do I get data? How do I filter data? How do I get just the properties of the data I want? How do I sort the data based on some field name? And I'm pretty confident if you go through this, you will have enough information that you could go to the scripts that we've got written and decipher what's actually being done in that. Excellent. So what do we also have planned in the future? Well, once this module is available, which is probably going to be around the September timeframe, right before Symposium, there's probably going to be translations into other languages, and they've got a laundry list of items in the backlog to work on. So once again, I really encourage you to use the module, come up with some ideas. If you'd like to see it in the product, let me know, and we can try and prioritize those as best as we can. And I do appreciate the opportunity to present here again. I wanted to make sure that you've seen his face while everyone's online and maybe seeing avatars. Adam Najmanowicz, my friend, he's in Poland, and he's the genius behind SPE and SXA. So if you've used either of those modules, which SPE is a prerequisite for SXA, so once you install that, you'll have both. You'll see that this guy is brilliant, and he's really the creator of the SPE and SXA module, and you can see the creativity come through those modules I encourage you to meet him in any opportunity you can. You see him at symposium or you see him at ZUGCon in Europe or India. He hopefully will be there. There's also a poster that we've produced for the SPE team. If you ever headed to symposium, let me know and I'll try to bring you a poster. I've got a bunch of them. And yeah,
Unmuted.
thank you. Appreciate
Definitely.
your time.
Muted.
Any questions, guys? I think everything's good. Okay. All right. We are just in time. Nizar is again here. On behalf of SUG Chennai, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Michael West for this wonderful session. He talked about Sitecore PowerShell extension and the futures released with 5.1 and changes coming in 6.0. And he also covered reporting tools and improvements with the nice demos. So it's good, I think. So once again, thank you, Michael, coming forward for this session and looking forward to have more session from you, Matt.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Unmuted. Muted.